Greetings, everyone. This is Payman Lorenzo, your host for this episode of the Leaders with a Heart podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, my good friend Chris. Chris is someone who's doing absolutely great things. He's helping people move from fear. The best way to describe him is to help people move from fear to trust when it comes to spending their money. That's what he's going to tell us more in this podcast. I had a brief chat with him earlier, and I was absolutely fascinated. And you guys will too. So, Chris, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much, Payman. I'm really, really excited to be here, share this with your audience, and be able to create more in the world from this.
Thank you. First of all, let's get to know you a bit. Tell us about your story. Who's Chris? Tell us about you.
Who's Chris? I'll tell you what. I just tried to write that yesterday, and it took me 2 hours. So I'm going to try to give you a shorter version that hopefully only takes a couple of minutes. Who am I? I am a 33-year-old dude living near Boston, Mass. Right now. Nice. I have a background in computer science, systems architecture, and putting structure to unstructured things. Basically, is what that means. And doing it in a way that is incredibly efficient. If you think about it, we're on a machine right now. We're talking right now. Everything moving between you and I is a 1 and a 0. And somehow we have to be able to make that happen efficiently without blowing out the computer. So efficient use of information with limited resources. My background, I grew up poor. I'll just say it. I grew up poor. My mom was on disability. We had less than $1,000 a month. And macaroni and cheese was one of my favorite foods, not because I wanted it to be. It became my favorite food, but that's a different story. So I watched her every single month do the same budget. It's the exact same budget. She wrote it out every single month. And I watched us about halfway through the month run out of money. And it wasn't because we didn't have any money. It was because she didn't follow her budget. And that was a thing that I just watched happen when I was young and just figured out we don't have any money. Oh, we'll go to Goodwill, or we'll shop at Savers or Save a Lot. These stores where you can get, like 7 cans of tuna fish for $1. So I did that, and I ended up, gaining a ton of weight and being really unhappy and being mostly depressed. And it just wasn't a good thing. And I blamed money because she always blamed money, of course. And we learned what we learned. We learned from trauma. Not always good things, but that's what we know. So that's what we have. So I was able to, move out of the house. And because I was blaming money, I thought work was the solution. So I got a corporate job. I never graduated college. I went to school for computer science, never graduated. Got a corporate job as a software engineer and a manager of IT. One role for a corporation, doing something that most people do in 3 or 4 different roles. And I did it for 7 years. I was at that company for 7 years. And it was the kind of company that is really under budget. They really don't want to spend a lot. Funny, I manifested that from living and growing up the way I did, to the point where if I needed to replace a computer, I had to plead with the accounting person because we didn't want our parent company to know that we were buying computers.
Wow.
We didn't want, it's a little bit of a parallel. Like if I were to go eat nice food when I was younger, I didn't want my mom to know because she'd be jealous. So interesting that happened. And that was one role again. And why that's important, because most of the time people are only trained in one area. People are only trained to write software or be support or run an IT department. But I had all that cross-domain training that allowed me to see the effect of thinking rationally on people's behavior and then what came back in terms of support requests. So I was very able to see how business thought, how that translated to software, and how people then interacted with it. And there's a huge disconnect there. I'm not really going to get into that here, but there's a huge disconnect. And so then I salary job, great. Oh, I have all the money in the world. Nope. I still felt like I didn't have a lot of money. I took a look at what I was doing, how I was spending, and I realized, wow, I'm spending a ton of money on Starbucks and coffee and takeout. And maybe if I control that, that'll be great. So I tried to do that. And it kind of helped, except I filled that space with other things I wanted, and I wanted them impulsively, and I wanted them without any kind of thought. And so I would do that. I would just go out, buy stuff, or I'd have credit cards. At one point I had 7 credit cards, maxed out, mind you, and some of them over, because I'm an impulsive spender. That's just part of my human nature. And, I closed them and managed them and paid them off after getting myself in that situation. And after asking for a raise, because naturally I didn't have enough money. And that didn't work out either. I was still strapped for money and I was pretty unhappy. Now I'm trying to control my budget. Now I'm trying to live within my means. Now I'm trying to deal with what I got and just be happy with what I have and scale down my wants and my growth and my expansion because I didn't have enough money. And so I got another job that paid more. And I moved thinking that that would help. And nope, not really. I mean, I still was spending impulsively. I ended up at one point spending $450 a month on coffee at Starbucks.
Wow.
Like, so cool. I'm an impulsive spender and I do things in a way that is impulsive. And as I started to track what I was spending, I realized, oops, sorry, I don't know if you picked that up. I realized that I realized that it was me and my behavior and my beliefs and my spending that was the problem. And I had to take a good hard look at trying to live within my budget and being unhappy because I was trying to cram myself and my impulses into what I said, things that made me happy, into this box I called a budget, versus living completely untethered and impulsively, which is what got me into the problem twice in my life with 7 credit cards. And so I had to find a balance. And I had to find a way to make it so that I wasn't stressed out all the time. I observed that when I had more money, like when I got paid, I would spend in one way. When I ran out of money, like halfway through the month, like when I was growing up, I would spend a different way. 2 completely different ways of thinking that I'm just coasting through life, not even noticing. And when I have money, I feel incredibly abundant and I'm an impulsive spender. And when I don't have money, I'm a lot more restrictive and I don't spend as much. So I couldn't say that I don't spend as much when I have money, because I don't spend as much when I don't. The same behavior can apply. So I pretty much dedicated the rest of my life up to now and still moving forward into recognizing those differences in our perception and how we see the world and the biases. That's really fundamentally a bias in how we see things based on external circumstance, because we're human, that drives our behavior. And once I was able to identify some of my biases, I was able to use them to my advantage by putting behaviors in between myself and the quote unquote bad behavior. For example, I started to get myself a prepaid card for Starbucks and only bring that with me when I went. So even if I wanted to spend more and ran out of money, I'm out of money. I started to pay all of my bills the day I got paid, regardless of whether they were due or not. I figured out a way to take all of my bills and make them one bill. So I wasn't thinking so much about paying all the bills. And then I knew that what I had left over was play money. I didn't have to worry about it. And I noticed something really particular, especially for people who get paid the same or relatively the same amount on a regular basis, is that most people get paid weekly or biweekly, but bills are due monthly. So in one pay period, I may have a whole lot of extra and may not have a whole lot of bills, but in the next one, I need to worry about how much I'm going to pay. So that pattern is what threw me. As I'm sitting here, oh, I just got paid. I can't spend any money, but I have money, but I can't spend any money, but I have money, but I can't, so it's this back and forth feeling that I experienced for a good portion of my life. I experienced it when I was younger with my mom. I experienced it when I got older, when I had a job. I experienced it even after that. That caused me to realize that people's behavior is dependent on their circumstance and their bias and on their personality. And ever since leaving that second job, I've been running a computer technology company because that's just what I did. But now I'm running a coaching business where I'm using that technology knowledge to build and have built a system that automatically aligns those values, those things that I hold or that other people hold dear. Why did I go spend a bunch of money on Starbucks? Well, because I like coffee. That's fine. Why did I go impulsively buy stuff for my car? Because I like to work on cars and I like to be creative and crafty. We all have values that drive our behavior. We all have values that cause us to act in a certain way. And that's all based on how we feel. So I've been able to align that spending of money, how much I set aside, so spending and saving, with how I feel and what I value. And ultimately what that does is let me be less stressed out so I can think more clearly. I later found out that by thinking about all of those decisions, I was actually impeding my ability to even think about those decisions. I could go into that a bit if you'd like. So I was able to think more clearly, make better decisions, and not be stressed out because I was constantly not aware and not thinking of all of the little pieces of where my money went and what I had to wait for in order to pay in terms of bills, and what I had to, what I wanted to buy and wasn't able to get. And I was able to think more about the things that I wanted and distribute the money that I had toward those things that I wanted in a way that was more controlled and that wasn't biased and that wasn't impulsive. It was probably a little more long-winded than I'd like to be, but I hope that works.
Oh, pretty interesting. Very good. So initially, how did you bridge the gap between, you mentioned that when you had money, you felt abundant and all that, spending money and all that, but when you, toward the middle of the month, we didn't have as much money, you had a shift in your mindset and approach. So how did you bridge the gap between the two to find a more balanced approach to how to go about, and how would you, what kind of tips would you give to other people who might be facing the same situation, and so that they can find a more balanced approach to their money and to their life?
Well, I'll kind of answer your question in the backwards order of how you said it. So what kind of tips can I give people? It's really dependent on the person. I've tried to push my own techniques. My own techniques, what I do for me, onto others, and it doesn't work for some people. And what I learned is that it's based on their personality and their proclivities and their particular biases. So going back to what I did for me, and then I'll round it out with what different people can do in different circumstances. For me, what I first started, it all started when I bought a car. I got a car. I bought one. I leased one. No, I got a loan for one. And I went into the office to sign the car. At this point, I had done none of this. This is not even a thing that had entered my mind. I was just pissed off all the time and impulsively spending because I thought I deserved to have the things that I wanted and have them when I wanted them. And of course, I had no patience because I wasn't getting what I wanted. So this was all conflict going on for me. I went in to buy a car because I had to get a car. And the dude sat me down. He said, "Hey, would you like to have your car payment be taken out of your paycheck when you get paid?" And I couldn't think of a reason not to say no. Why wouldn't you say no to that? That guarantees your car payment's going to be paid. That's a guarantee that your car payment is going to be paid. So I said, absolutely. And he said, "Oh, by the way, it also means you're going to get an extra payment in every month or every year because of just how weeks overlay with years." And, I can get into the math of that, but it's true. If you pay things every week or every other week, you'll get an extra payment in a year.
Sure.
So I said yes, and I signed up for it. And I realized in that moment that was a convenience, and that's all I really thought of. Coming months, I realized I never think about my car payment, ever. I got paid. Money came out of my account the day that I got paid, period. The money was taken out of my account before I even saw the bank because it all happened midnight that night. So I never thought about my car payment. My car was always paid for. I got paid and I saw the bank balance, and what was left was what was left. I get what I get. Now, remember, I said that earlier. You get what you get, but I said it in a way that was victim-y. I said it in a way that was circumstantial. Oh, because of the circumstance, I just get what I get. But now when I looked at the bank and I knew I had the security of my car payment being handled, I could say, oh, I get what I get. And I also got that already I didn't even have to think about it. Handled, done. So then I got to thinking, well, how can I do this for other things? What about that insurance payment I have to pay every year? Or what about, car maintenance? What if when I get paid, I just put some money in the bank for these things? I never have to worry about them again, is the feeling. I wanted to replicate that feeling. I wanted to take that feeling of never, ever, ever worrying, feeling safety and security. And that's really relevant in the values part of this whole thing. And taking safety and security to every other thing I pay for, every other thing I do, every other thing I have. And so I started just by putting money aside for things like car repairs. And it took about a year. Sometimes I'm a little slow. It took about a year for me to call the company and say, "Hey, can I do this with all my bills?" And they said I could. And at that time I had 15 bills between credit cards, car payments, rent, electric, internet, all the things, 15 bills. And I didn't have the capital to do it with all my bills, because what they require and what I now coach people on, in part, this is one of the many strategies I use. This is like one of, 20 different things we can do. But this seems to be a universal thing that benefits people. What I now do, or what I didn't have the capital, because they need a full payment up front to guarantee that when the bill's due, they can pay it. So I had $2,000 worth of bills that I had to pay, and I didn't have $2,000 in the bank. So I'm like, all right, I'll set aside some money from what's left over after I pay my bills keeping with the stress of trying to be, paying these 15 bills that I have, keeping with the stress of that timing. Later, by the way, I also made a chart, and I can share this with anybody who's interested, where you plug in all your bills, you plug in the due date, you plug in the days that you get paid, and it shows you when you're going to feel the most stress. Because if I get paid the week before my rent payments due, then I can't spend any of that money because I don't know what's going to happen the following week, and the rent's going to be due. Anyway, they said yes. So I started to put money aside, and I started to do some math. I'm a math guy. Remember, I'm an engineer. I'm a systems architect. So I figured out I'm going to have this much money in the bank, X amount of money in the bank. Maybe it'll be twice the bill. And then I'll call them and I'll say to them, all right, we can put this bill on auto pay. It took about 2 years because I had other things that came up. I had more emergencies, more bandwidth of mine that was being taken up, that was being taxed. That's another concept I teach, is bandwidth tax. And I eventually got all my bills, including my rent, which was about $1,200 at the time, on auto pay. Not just on auto pay, though, on auto pay when I get paid. So it wasn't that they just took it out of my account. It was that they took it out of my account in proportion to the amount that was due when I got paid. So I would get paid, let's call it $2,500. I'd have $2,000 taken out. I'd have $500 left over. Never had to think about paying bills again, ever. Never had to worry about how much I would have left over because I got salary and the amount that was taken out was the same. So I talk about streamlining. One of my early pitches for Mindful Money was that I streamline expenses and income. And that's a strategy, certainly. Because if you do that, you never have to think about it. And you know that what's at the bottom of that stream, what's at the bottom of that stream is above, in terms of like a hierarchy of values, let's say, or in terms of a feeling state, security's handled. So everything above that is I would call it fun money. It's not really fun money, but it's not to pay a bill. Right. So then I started to say, what do I want for my life? Hey, I actually have some extra money. Now that everything's normalized, I actually see how much I have. When I get paid, I know I could spend all of this and I'll have this again in 2 weeks. So I started to say to myself, all right, what is it that I want for my life? And I started to realize that I was keeping myself from wanting because I couldn't keep up with all the tax on my mind. Bandwidth tax, I mentioned this earlier, is a phenomenon discovered by a Harvard and Princeton professor. Basically says, as we have to make more decisions, as we have more decisions to make, we get dumber, and it's measurable, and it's the equivalent of being drunk. And it's way earlier than we think. Just a little aside here, the study specifically was to ask a group of people, there were two groups of people. One group got asked if you had to do a repair on your car and it cost $500, would you do it now? Would you do it later? Or would you take out a loan? He had them take an IQ test. Following that, and said the same question, except $5,000. If you had to do a $5,000 repair, would you do it now? Would you take out a loan or would you do it later? And then they had them take an IQ test. The group that had the $5,000 loan or the $5,000 repair scored 10 points lower on average across the board. So that's the equivalent to being drunk from one simple choice. Now, in our coaching, and I know in your coaching, we talk about systemization. We talk about streamlining things, making things easier, making things simpler, more digestible. Well, that's why. If you don't do that, you're stressing yourself out for no reason. And that's what I started to notice, is everything that I was doing with my money, with my wanting, I wasn't able to feel like I could want because of all the bandwidth tax that I was up against.
One question on that. Sorry to interrupt you. You said the more thing we have to think about, the more we feel kind of, hesitant and like a drunk. So is it mostly the amount of decisions we have to make, or also does it also depend on the importance of the decision that we have to make? Because making a decision on a $500 repair versus a $5,000 repair, it's not the same question you're asking yourself. The 500 can be like, okay, no problem, let's do it right now. But the 5,000, some people will say, hey, let me think more carefully about that. And that's to say, okay, sometimes when we face with more difficult questions, we tend to procrastinate and leave that for later. So how much of that would you say is due to the impact of that question versus the number of questions? You know what I mean?
I think so. I think the number of questions is a factor, but I think the intensity of the question is the trump card. Mm-hmm. So one thing I measure, I quantify in my coaching is how bad do you want something? because the inverse of how bad do you want something is how impulsive are you going to be about getting the thing you want. And so to use a metaphor used by those same scientists that did the study, imagine you're packing a suitcase. This is going to answer your question. Imagine you're packing a suitcase to go on a trip. And it doesn't matter how many things you have to pack, unless you only have to pack one, in which case, screw the metaphor. But most people pack more than one thing, right? So if you're the kind of person, do you pack your suitcase to be all the way full, or do you leave yourself some room? Serious question. Do you pack your suitcase to be all the way full, or do you leave yourself some room? And I could ask you this, could ask the audience this. For me, I pack my suitcase to be all the way full.
Yeah, same here.
I don't like that I do it. Yeah. So what does that mean? It means you're walking out the door and you realized you forgot something.
Always.
It's not about how do I put the thing in my suitcase anymore. The question about $5,000 is not about $5,000. Question about $5,000 is about, what do I have to take out? Which then prompts you to go into, let me assess the importance of everything in my suitcase again. Which then prompts you to go into, what really isn't important to me and what am I sacrificing? So we talk about cognitive bias, and there is a bias that makes us make decisions that are worse for us because we don't think that we can, even if we can. And that's the suitcase metaphor. So it's the intensity. It's how many of those decisions do you have to think about for the $5,000 repair? If I only got $6,000, it's a lot of decisions.
Sure.
It's not the number of questions. It is the number of decisions, but it's the decisions inside the decisions that we really don't see as a result of just what we've come to accept. I mean, we as humans have come to accept that we have to make stressful decisions and be stressed out all the time and work all the time. We don't have to. We choose to, because we don't know how to handle overwhelm. We don't know how to handle another bias. Is that bias isn't bad. Like, I speak about bias as if it's a bad thing. Well, that's how it started. I'll get back to my story in a sec. Bias isn't bad. We can only hold 5 to 7 things in our heads at one time. It's a limitation of being a human being. Bias is a limitation of being a human being. So if we have to make more than a couple decisions, what things do we have to take out of the suitcase? How do we choose what's important? How do we choose what's important? It's a whole set of decisions in and of itself. Am I just going to say F it and take stuff out, even if I need it, just to fit in the thing I forgot? Am I just going to shove it in and maybe break something? Am I, all of that we don't even think about and react to, because unconscious bias is reactionary. Conscious bias is empowering. That is kind of where the answer to your question sits, somewhere in there.
Cool. Awesome.
Going back to quickly, what I experienced was that I had all of these bills. I realized the liberation of not having to choose. I realized the freedom of wanting. And then I started to say, all right, well, now how do I choose? It's the same question, but it's without all the stress of security and fear, right? How do I choose how to prioritize what I want? And I went through so many iterations of this, from saying, all right, I'm going to put a bunch of stuff in one bucket, and I'm going to have some stuff in another bucket, a virtual bucket, like a grouping. And then I'm going to save $200 out of this first bucket to put toward the second bucket. And I'm going to figure out, how long it's going to take me to get a thing. All kinds of math, all kinds of experimentation. And ultimately where I arrived is like, it's all dependent on our values and how we value those things and how much we trust ourselves. If we don't trust ourselves very much, like at the beginning, when I didn't have a whole lot of faith in myself to even want, there was no way in my world that I was going to allow myself to see past that. And I was only putting money toward the things that I thought were the most important. Once I got out of scarcity and security and had all my bills paid in a streamlined way, what I realized is what I thought was important wasn't. It was a coping mechanism. And then I started to put more money toward what was really important. But that left me with less toward the things I thought I wanted. So it's this interesting relationship that I started to study for the next, 5 years. And here we are today, where I've got a system, a program that I've written, a bunch of code in a spreadsheet. At this point, it's soon going to be a phone app that allows you to plug in your hierarchy of values. So things that you value intrinsically. I have a meditation that your viewers can download. It's one of my free offers. You can download it, listen to the meditation, do the exercise. It comes with a worksheet. You'll get your hierarchy. So you'll be able to say, I really feel in my body this, and this way when security is threatened. That's a really easy way to notice if your biases are coming into play. If I feel this negative emotion, then my security is threatened. I feel such and such a way when my spirituality is threatened, when my fitting in is threatened, all these things. And you have this hierarchy then, and then everything you want fits in one of those buckets. I've also written some software to help you make unbiased decision making, because if you look at a grouping of things, like when I told you I had these things in groups and buckets, but looking at the buckets, I was like, oh, this feels right. But when I was able to learn more about bias, I realized that it feels right because what am I doing? I'm just taxing my mind to make bad decisions again by looking at too many things. So I've created a system where you only look at two things and it's an either or, and it compares everything against everything and prioritizes. And I guarantee you, if I were to take you through that right now with a list of things, whatever the prompt is, what you think it would be and what it would be different. So we have that. And then I've also got the solution, which is part of my program, which allows you to take that hierarchy, take all the things that you want, take all your expenses, plug in whatever amount of money that you have, and it tells you what to put toward what. And it does it in accordance with your feelings, in accordance with your values, and in accordance with what you have, which is the size of your suitcase, right? So if you have a small suitcase, you can't put as much in there. You're going to have to make a little tougher decisions. If you got a massive suitcase, if you got a truck, you can put a lot more in there. It makes a little easier decisions. Of course, with a truck, then you start to think, hey, I can fill this truck with stuff. That's human nature. So what I learned was that people want far past what they have. That's another human nature part. But because we have to live by the budget, we're shamed for even wanting. And because we have bandwidth tax, we don't even know that we're shamed.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So that's a lot of talking. I hope that's okay.
No, it's awesome. I love what you're doing. It's great, especially about decluttering what we're going through and making the decisions more easier, more streamlined. That's exactly what a lot of people are struggling. Even myself, a lot of times I find myself struggling with that. So no, I love that. So that's right. That's cool.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you said that really stood out, I mean, since the beginning, you said you help people to go from fear. What was it again? Let me just go back to that beautiful sentence. You said
fear to trust.
Moving people from going from fear to trust when it comes to spending their money. So that's your business. Tell us more about that. So what's exactly your business? What kind of, tell us more about your program, what you're doing, and how is that helping people with their financial and as well as their mindset? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going back to aligning spending and saving with values and feelings so that they can create mental resiliency and be consistent. So what a theme was when I told my story, and I intentionally framed it this way, is that I went from not being consistent and being strung out, trying to even keep track of bills. And maybe, people listening, maybe you aren't strung out thinking about bills, but now let's think about your kids and all they're wanting. And I bet you that you don't even know what to buy them first. And the only way that you can tell is by what they repeat, something like that. So I went from there into a place where I could then feel like I was getting what I needed and wanted, and it was effortless. And so the input, I've given you a lot about how I got to where I am and the input of my system. The input is values, the input is feelings, the input is desires, the input is impulses, the input is the money you have, but the output. Let me ask you a question, Payman. If you consistently do a habit over and over and over again, and you are successful over and over and over again, how do you feel?
Pretty good. Pretty confident.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So another word for fear is another word for trust is confidence.
Yes.
Trust is confidence in an outcome. That's it. So if you're at a place where you're consistently seeing that you're putting money toward the things that you want, even if that amount changes, because our values shift all the time based on circumstance. It's just the nature of being human. And I account for that in the system. It's a pretty, everybody I've shown this to has been, they didn't even know spreadsheets could do this kind of thing. So it's something new that has not been built before. Your conventional systems say stick to your budget, or one of the common systems out there, it's a system named after a guy, not after a guy, but the same name as a popular British chef, right? Who gets angry all the time. This guy's system, I think you know who I'm talking about. This guy's system says, hey, if you go over budget in one place, you have to figure out all the quantification and to the cent accounting of another place. Nope. If you go over budget in one place, it's okay. Adjust your budget. And because of some of the things that we bake in, like I'll give you a free one now, overestimate your expenses and underestimate your income, and do it by like $25 to $50. If you always do that, you'll always have more. Simple. So if you go over or under your budget, no big deal, you got more. And never look in the past. People do this all the time. They're like, where did the 10 cents go? I'm like, it doesn't matter where the 10 cents went. Where do you want to go? Like the 10 cents is gone. You got your bank balance as it is. You could fight the 10 cents or move forward. Where do you want to go?
Yeah.
So you asked how this works. I mean, trust is confidence. You do the same thing over and over again, regardless of whether the contents change. Like you might have a morning routine. You might add something to it. You might take something away from it. Some days, I got a partner. Some days she talks to me before my routine. Some days I'm out the door before she's even awake. Some days I take the dog out before I do a certain thing, some days after. It doesn't matter how the content shift around. It doesn't matter how your values sit. But if you know that you've always made the best decision possible, given what you have, and what is the best decision except an intrinsic alignment with your values and your feelings, then you have trust. Like it comes as a result. So because you have trust, then you can know that you're going to do it again. It's what confidence is. You're confident that you're going to do it again. You're confident that you have momentum. Yeah. It's second nature. So if I say, here's a way to think, and here's a process, and here's a set of tools, and let me coach you on the set of tools, and then you become confident in that set of tools, then no matter whether you want something or something adjusts in your value system or something adjusts in your income, the trust, the confidence is in this statement. I know I'm always doing what's best for me in the best way that I can. And that's really what I try to edify in every call is, are you doing the best thing for you in the best way that you can? And if that's true, then there's nothing to worry about. And all the fear that comes up is a result of emotion. And what is that fear? Fear is the result of broken trust. Our ability to manage that broken trust. So cognitive bias, bandwidth tax, and, most importantly, trust in ourselves and our capability. We have all the capability that we need, but if we don't have trust, we don't even believe that we can. So financial fear is making decisions as if we're drunk, like I mentioned. And it causes us ultimately to have regret, buyer's remorse, feel like, I brought in the analogy of when I had a lot of money and when I didn't earlier. I did that on purpose because that feeling of, I don't have enough, maybe I should have. That's not trust. That's fear. That's financial fear. So trust is that confidence. Trust is the result of repeated success. Trust is trust is not based in size. You asked a great question about the suitcases and the decisions. It's not based in the size of that suitcase. It's based in the amount of consistent wins you have. Do you always have that extra room to put the thing into your suitcase or your truck? It doesn't matter the size of the truck. Or are you constantly flooding yourself with additional decisions that you don't even know you're making and then taxing yourself? And what does that create? Nothing more than happiness. So really I create happiness, but I can't claim that,
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
And so like down to brass tacks, how I do it is really simple. We just got to get clear on your values. We got to get clear on your wanting. And I can guarantee you that if I were to say to you, what do you want? Give me a list. You could only name a few items, or maybe if you have it written down, you've got some. But then if I show you that it's possible to get what you want, you're going to come up with more stuff. You're going to. It's human nature. So we start there. What do you want?
It's all about belief. Yeah.
What is it?
It's all about belief.
Yep. It's all about belief, and it's all about trust, belief and trust. So if you have belief and you trust, then you're expansive. And that's what I want people to be. And if people are expansive, then they don't have fear. Then they don't have impulse. Then they're not victim to being preyed on. What does that do? It fundamentally changes how we look at money, how we look at currency, how we look at exchange. If I could say to you, Payman, hey, I value this, and you're like, I value that way, 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 way more, I could say, all right, well, because you value it more and I value it a little bit, I'm willing to let it go for a very low price, and it's probably a lower price than you think. And it may not even be a price. It might be an exchange. Hey, I'm going to give you this thing that you super value. And if you have something that I really value and you give that to me, then then I feel satisfied. And it may be something you don't value at all. One man's trash is another man's treasure is an old way of saying it. I have a podcast, episode 1, Trading Goats, talks about it. It talks about in, olden days, you might need some goats, and, as a result of my neighbor having some, he might ask me to build a barn. There's no money exchanged. All that dollars are the universal currency, the universal value system that we don't even own in America. It's not even owned by America. We're not going to get into that here, but, it's a universal agreement on a value system. If I were to say, what is the value of money to you? It would stump you. I've done it to so many people, unless you've really looked into it and have come to the conclusion that for you, money is freedom. Well, then what is money? What is freedom? Freedom is moving through all of the restrictions and all of the challenges. Well, what does that even mean? And what does it mean for people who don't have money then? So we need to redefine how we look at ourselves, our currency, and our money. And ultimately, what people leave with at the end of the program is an understanding of their personal currency, an understanding of their values, an understanding of how to communicate in terms of those values in a way that takes all of their emotions into account, even if the receiving party doesn't understand that structure. And with a way to just plug in the amount of resource that they have and allocate it in accordance with that entire value set. So complete transparency on their impulses, complete transparency on their biases, complete transparency on what hijacks them, strategies and methods. You asked about that too, that can help. I mentioned things like overestimating and underestimating, never looking behind, never looking in the past. I also really embrace, and I've alluded to this, but the idea of dispersing your money as soon as you get it, no matter what. Have the plan, and I help make that plan simple, but disperse the money as soon as you get it, because if you do, by disperse, I mean spend, because if you do, then whatever you have left, is money for you. You can look at the bank and not worry. And how many times do you check the bank account? So I get into all of those kind of things. And more.
So what is the structure of your program? You said it's a 12-week program?
Yeah. So I have a 12-week program and I have a 6-week program. So the 6-week is a fast track. It's a little bit more intense. And it's, so the 6-week and the 12-week is both one-on-one. I do it with you. I sit down with you. I go through the exercises with you. You have homework. It's like a course, but it's a one-on-one course. At the very first part of the course, we start to get into your money story, what it is that you even believe. What do you believe money is? What do you believe the nature of money is? How do you relate to money? That's why when you ask for my background, I put it all in the context of money, because that's what we're talking about. But what is money except a value system? So my value system when I was younger, poverty, not enoughness, anger, resentment, fear, shame. My mom was an alcoholic as well. Fear, shame, all those things. And then what did I have to move into? Deservingness, appreciation, freedom, simplicity, that kind of thing. So we get into that in week 1. We get really intimate with the idea of fear and how that works. We get really clear with bias and what bias even is and how that takes effect in your life. And we do that through that list building exercise and that prioritization exercise I mentioned to you. And then we demonstrate in week 1 exactly how bias is affecting your decision making. And we wrap that all up by showing you how much you could have if you weren't spending in a biased way. We take a yearly look at what you have to pay versus what you make and what that could look like. But I get 100% of the time, it never adds up, because you're like, whoa, and why doesn't it add up? Bias. So then we take that, you have some homework there. Week 2, we start to dig more into biases. We start to get more into the idea of bandwidth tax. We start to get more into this bandwidth tax concept that I just described here, really get a personal feel for how that shows up for you and what your triggers are. I also mentioned earlier that some of these tips and tactics don't work for everybody. So one such example, and this is in week 2, this is where we reveal what would work for you, what wouldn't. We start to look at what happens in any moment. And I'm not talking moment like my mindfulness practice, like that regular process that I do. I'm talking or in that case, the habit that I alluded to earlier. I'm talking about right now, and now, and now, and now, and now. What's happening? Ultimately, what we do as humans is we aggressively filter any information that's noise, right? Anything that's irrelevant, we aggressively filter. So when that happens, noise tends to become signal. we start to have false belief about what that is. We start to fill in gaps that don't exist. This is how bias is created. Then we create a story around this fake information. Then we start to act from that fake information. So we break all that down with any example that, like, I can do this with anything, and demonstrate how bias is showing up even further. And then we get into the value hierarchy. We flesh that out for people. So what is it that you value? What is your emotional positive and negative ties to each level of your value hierarchy? How does that affect your trust? And what is it now that you have this transparency that you want and have been denying yourself? Because that'll naturally come. Moving from there, we integrate the two. We integrate week 1 and week 2. We take your budget, we take what you could have, we take your wants, we take your hierarchy, and we blend it into this system that will build trust if it's used repeatedly. We demonstrate it pretty clearly, and then we start to get into the idea of this concept of the envelope system, of putting your money aside in these allocated intentional ways toward these desires that you have, and the relationship between groups of those things. I mentioned earlier intentionally that when I was building the program, I had these buckets, right? And I was struggling to figure out the relationship between all the buckets. Well, the value hierarchy does that, but then you have to have a relationship with your wants through that value hierarchy. We get into that. We program that system, and then you do your first practice using that system. Now, an example to your question earlier of what is a strategy that doesn't always work for some people. I'm an impulsive spender, which means when I see money, I spend money. It's really easy for me to do. I can justify the hell out of anything because of how my brain works, which is great. Great if I'm in a negotiation. Great if I'm a salesperson. Great if I'm being interviewed. Anything except impulsive spending, because I can justify the expense. So what I do is I have over 20 bank accounts. They're savings accounts. There's 2 banks that, yeah, I know. People laugh at me. There's 2 banks I recommend. You can laugh. It's fine. I get it all the time. There's 2 banks I recommend for this. If this is your thing, if you're an impulsive spender, if I were to say, here's $5,000, now go get everything you want. And either you wouldn't know where to start or you'd get other things. Great practice. Savings accounts, Capital One 360 and Ally Bank. I'm not affiliated with them except that I have accounts with them. And I have probably 10 to 15 accounts in each. Some of them aren't used. So what I do, all of my wants that I'm currently have active based on my means are plugged into the system. I use the system every day. They're plugged into the system, and they automatically tell me how much to put into each account. So each account is intentional, whether it's car maintenance, whether it's nootropics, because I take those because they're awesome, whether it's workout stuff, home repair, home improvement, whatever it is, whatever my things I want are and buckets I want are their bank accounts. And because the system tells me how much to put toward each thing, that's what I do. So if I were to look at the balance of my bank accounts, yeah, I got a couple grand in there. But when I look at, this is another bias, right? When I look at the balance of any one of them, none of them are very high. There's a bias that says that when we see small denominations of things, it feels like less than if we see one big account. And something important to note about biases is there's some that affect everybody, and there's some that affect you based on your personality. This one affects me a lot, but some people I've told that to, and they're like, how the hell, why do you do that? And they'll fundamentally disagree. And what I've learned is they're disagreeing because it doesn't work for them, and that's fine. But you have to still have a way to track kind of what you're putting money towards. Otherwise this all breaks down. And so I have an alternative option if you just want to keep the money in your bank.
That's actually very smart. That's very smart to have like a specific account for a specific purpose, like one say for vacation, one for, as you said, entertainment, one for workout, or for, and so on and so forth. That's absolutely amazing. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. And that's really important because, well, I'll come back to that one in a minute. So just moving on through how the program works. Week 4, the following week, after we've introduced that practice, after we've started to, get you set up with some of these accounts, we do that practice again with you. We start to create the habit. One data point does not a pattern make, right? That's one of my favorite phrases. And Aristotle, kind of not really Aristotle though, says we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. So this is the second time you go through it. Now, the first time you don't have a lot of faith. You don't have a lot of trust. This is new. It's confusing. It's weird. I don't know how to do it. But then the second time you come around and you're like, oh, I actually have money for these things. Oh, I'm actually going to get the things I said I wanted, and we're doing it again. So the second time around, you start to build that trust, and you start to do that more. We start to edify what that mindfulness practice looks like. We start to go back through the psychology of it just another time. And then from then on out, it's about reducing the cognitive bias and bandwidth tax. So another strategy that I use, I kind of alluded to, but didn't necessarily say I use, maybe I did, I don't know, is to consolidate all of your income sources and your expense sources. So two separate actions with the same strategy into one. So let's say I have, I know every month I have $3,500 of expenses, but they're timed in really weird ways. And, $2,000 of that comes out at once. I'm going to say, let's figure out a way to build up an account with $4,000 in it, automatically deduct from that account and contribute into that account the same amount every week. That way you don't have to think about it. It's auto pay on steroids, kind of. So I have all these techniques that we apply based on the personality. One thing I forgot to mention is at the very beginning, I have people take personality tests like Myers-Briggs, like the DISC test, all those things, because I want to have a deep understanding of their predilections and their tendencies. And I want them to as well, because this idea of bias isn't a negative thing. It's a thing that we need to be compassionate and aware of and about. Like, you need to know your strengths in order to play to them, because you're going to be really good at them if you play to them. And your weaknesses, well, we just need to make them less impactful. A lot like making expenses lower. So then the rest of the coaching is just going through that. In the 12 weeks, I teach you to maintain that practice. I teach you to maintain, I teach you more and more techniques about how to implement these things. And in some cases, I even do some of them for you. And then I give you a way to make it a little bit more sustainable, because after about a month of doing the practice, people start to notice the freedom that comes with it and start to wonder what to do next, how to manage that extra that they have, or how to allocate a certain percentage of their income at a certain point to a certain thing. And those are the strategies we get into in the longer term plan.
Awesome. It sounds like an amazing course. And you said you're planning on launching that very soon, right?
Yeah. So we're looking to launch that at the beginning of December. The one-on-ones are a little bit more liberal, but that's essentially the template that we would follow, whether it's a one-on-one or whether it's a group coaching. The group coaching is a little bit cheaper. The one-on-ones are obviously a little bit more expensive. The group coaching goes longer because the group coaching requires, it's not one. Excuse me. I'm sorry. It's not one-on-one. And so there's going to move maybe a little slower. There's going to be more people involved. You're going to have peer support. It'll be more exploring of different ideas. It'll be more digital than it, and in groups than it will be kind of like we are right now.
So tell me,
less
what's
personalized too.
That's good. No problem. Tell me, what is your vision with this? What do you want to achieve with this?
Really, really, really easy. I want people to not, let me make that in the positive. I want people to feel empowered by themselves and know their value rather than have it be told to them. Most of my life, I was told I was poor. Most of my life, I was told I couldn't afford a thing. Most of my life, I was told that I just couldn't do it. And when I look back, what I've learned is I couldn't do it because I was burnt out trying to figure out how to do it because I was never told how to do it. And once I got not burnt out, the whole world opened up. Like, I felt so much more capable. And because I felt so much more capable, I was able to do more. If people know the language of their wanting, the language of their values, that creates what I call a personal currency. It creates a thing that we can exchange with. If I say to you, hey, I really, really value your input on this particular topic, and you give it to me, and it's not even hard for you to do, then you've basically given a $100 bill to a homeless guy. For you, $100 ain't much, but to that homeless guy, it's a lot. One of the side effects of this whole exploration is studying the difference between how people perceive a dollar, not only in different things they value. So staying at the same income level, $1 on a cheeseburger is different than $1 towards something you want, or a car or whatever it is. Sure. But if we change income levels, now we're dealing with that value of $1 actually changing. Well, that's way too complicated. Why don't we just use a personal currency and know where, say, your value for giving to the homeless sits relative to mine, and then just talk in those terms and talk according to that equation. It's no different than countries converting currency. Why can't we do it? And if we do that, then we have a debt-free economy. We have an economy where people are empowered by their choices. We have an economy where people are willing to wait for the things that they want. We're less reactive. We're certainly more proactive. And what is that? The end of all conflict. It's the end of all conflict because if I can effectively explain or see without even an explanation, like in The Sims, right? You see these graphs above people's heads and stuff. If I can effectively see the relative value of something between you and me, I know a couple things. One, I'm not going to go to you if you value something way more than I do and I need it.
Sure.
That just doesn't make sense. I'm not going to go to a homeless guy for a sandwich. The other thing is that I start to notice when people with similar values are around, which then means that I know that if I communicate with a person about a thing, anything, it will be received, which means that I no longer need to worry about being heard. Big problem that people have. Feeling seen, big problem that people have. Or feeling validated, big problem that people have, because I know that I will be understood. So then I don't need to get into any kind of conflict because I recognize that the words I say are what's being received on the other end. And I don't even need to get into too much explanation because I recognize that the meaning of what I say is the same meaning on the other end. The end of all conflict and individual wealth through personal currency, if you were to sum that up.
Yes, that's beautiful. I love your what you're doing and all that, and I'm sure it's gonna tremendously help a lot of people because you cannot imagine how many people are affected by that. Not only just with the mindset and the mentality that and all the negative things that they were brought up with. You said for you in your case, it was you said poverty and being told nonstop, you can't do that, you cannot afford that. And I know a lot of people, were raised in that environment as well. So what you're doing is amazing, and that's a beautiful segue because the next phase of this podcast, because the name of this podcast, the topic of this podcast is Leaders with a Heart. That is people that are doing great things, but also impacting, people in need and also building businesses with a cause. So in your case, what cause would you say is very dear to your heart, and what cause, if any, are you currently involved in and giving back, whether it's for your time, mentorship, or even financial contribution in any way, shape, or form?
It's a good question. What cause? Can you repeat that?
What cause is what cause would you say is dear to your heart that you would be interested, or either you're currently working on, contributing towards, or would like to get involved in the near future?
Sure. I mean, if I were to say, hey, what cause is out there that people are already contributing toward, that already exists, homelessness, poverty, homelessness and poverty, but like it's deeper than that. So what cause is near to my heart
that you relate with, that resonates with you the deepest?
I'm trying to articulate it. Something along the lines of feeling misunderstood because I'm not clear. So what is that? What is that cause? That causes clarity, that causes transparency, and that causes trust in myself. But not trust in myself, everybody trusting themselves. Why don't people trust themselves? Because they're not clear, because they're not confident, because they haven't done the same thing that makes them confident over and over and over again. And they think that they should be like everybody else because they don't know themselves. So I guess personal mastery.
Personal mastery. Okay. It's good. Yeah.
Cause that I'm involved in just dawned on me. The Mankind Project. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're an international group, an international nonprofit, global. And they're all about men's personal mastery. And I've been a member of that group for over 10 years. I haven't been as abundant in it as I could be, but I'm making an effort to get back. And with the Mankind Project, a lot of the reflection that I've had, a lot of the acting out that I have realized that I'm doing, a lot of the anger that I realize I hold just as being a man is, and the toxicity that I hold as just being a man is kind of, it's helped me realize that I have and hold and do those things. And as a result, I'm able to look more inside. We can't We can't look at something that we don't see, and we can't see something that we don't want to see. So uh, personal mastery starts with the desire to understand. And that desire is very there in me. And I think everybody has that desire, but they've surrendered to the fact that they won't or can't. And I think that's a cop out, but I also think that they have to be ready, So what better way to see that than through how we're using our resources? What better way to see that than through impulsiveness and bias, right? Those kind of things. And we as humans like to find any out. This is a human nature thing. It's one of those fixed biases. We like to find any out that we can. We like to make any excuse that we can. We like to procrastinate. So if we can accept that, then when we see ourselves procrastinating, we can approach it with compassion. So personal mastery, compassion as a cause. I could just keep talking. I'm sure you have another question though.
Sure, that's going to be, yeah. That's a topic I'm also very passionate, because I believe that we entrepreneurs have not only a duty but also responsibility to do good, not just because it's the right thing to do as a human being, but also because doing good is good for business. Because people love to do business with businesses that have a purpose and mission and a heart, yeah, it has to be something much. Time comes that it's something much bigger than us. That all our basic primal needs are met, and now we have to do something bigger. As I keep saying, there's one quote that really blew my mind away, and I mentioned that in every podcast ever since, is that the two most important dates in a person's life is, first when you're born, and second is when you find out why you're here. What's your mission? What's your purpose? What's your reason? Now, not everybody gets to experience that, because a lot of people are just, for whatever reason, that they don't even get to awaken to that. But when we do, those of us that actually do that and get to realize why we are here, then that changes everything in our mind and our approach, and changes our life and makes us a completely different person. Like for me, I've always been someone that loved helping people, but now it's just that now that I'm in a position to actually do something to contribute, I feel like a completely different person. I feel like I'm on a mission. I'm almost like unstoppable and it gives me so much clarity. And I'm sure it's the same for most people when they actually understand why they're here, what's their reason, what's their purpose, then they feel like a completely different person. Like all the menial, stupid, small little details that were slowing down, now they brush them apart and say they focus on much more important things. And I'm sure you've noticed the same thing too, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, with me, as soon as I felt the feeling of not having to worry about what isn't money, but what is money, as soon as I felt the feeling of having all my bills handled and all my things handled, and saw the possibility of being able to focus on whatever I wanted didn't mean a material thing either. It was just, I don't have to worry about this thing that consumes me every day. Excuse me. I had a lot more space to feel. And I think that's ultimately what you mean, or what you're alluding to in purpose and mission, is if you have the space, the unlimited space to feel all the things that you're not feeling because of the stress, where is it that you feel to,
For sure. We can talk about that for a long time, because I can feel this is something that you also as passionate as me in that. But yeah, let me ask you something quite fun, and even if you were to tell us something about you that is unique, that is a part of the fabric of who you are, but not many people know about. Something really unique about you that makes Chris the Chris that you are.
There's a lot of things. I don't know how much of those I want to share. I'll say this. I haven't said this publicly yet, but one of the things that is part of my story that has certainly helped shape my understanding of why I'm different, or why I understand things in the way that I do, or how I see this interconnected web of how people relate, how I was able to even build an algorithm to calculate trust and quantify it, is that, and I learned this just a couple of years ago, is that I'm on the spectrum. So I have autism, which fundamentally means that I'm more like a quantum computer than a linear machine. I more work on probability than and potential than I do absolutes. I don't do black and white. There's no black and white with me. Even if there's a complete, if something's completely black, you can still get more black, or if there's completely black, then the only way it's black is because there's white. So there's never a point when I'm not looking at something or I'm not looking at anything as, okay, here's the lower bound of that concept, here's the upper bound of that concept, and meaning falls somewhere in between. Even in the words that we're using here, words are an abbreviation. What do they abbreviate? A bigger energy, a bigger idea, a bigger concept. And I'm trusting that what I'm saying is landing, but I'm also saying a lot. So I'm recognizing that maybe I'm not so trusting about that. And the only way that we can know for certain is through trust. And the only way that we can have trust is through repeated success. So with the autism, I've been able to see all the probability of people wanting a certain thing or a certain type of thing, or I see in abstractions, and I can manipulate those abstractions. So I'm good at software. I can manipulate those abstractions and speak to something generally. Like when we say a door, there's so many variations of a door, but we know what a door means because it has certain characteristics. When I say values and desires, there's so many different forms that can take, but values and desires have certain characteristics that you can relate to. And by relating to those characteristics, if I manipulate the characteristics, I manipulate anything that comes down from it. So it's helped me be able to build what I built and helped me be able to relate to almost anybody.
Beautiful. I mean, I love listening to you because you have so much, despite being a young man, you have a lot of wisdom in you. You have a lot of life experiences that you're sharing, and they're absolutely amazing. So if someone wants to reach out to you, how can they find you?
Well, if you go to practicemindfulmoney.com, so mindful money is a practice that builds trust. So practicemindfulmoney.com. That's the website. There's the book I mentioned there. I don't know if I mentioned it before we got on or not, but it gives you 5 tips to have more at the end of the month. There's also a link to the podcast and a contact page. If you want to write me directly, you could do chris@practicemindfulmoney.com.
What's the name of your podcast?
The Mindful Money Podcast.
The Mindful, okay.
So Mindful Money Podcast, you should just be able to Google it and find it, or it's linked to on the website as well. It's on iTunes, it's on Stitcher, it's on Spotify, it's on all the major places.
Yeah, I'll definitely link it up on the show notes, and I'll also be subscribing to your podcast.
That'd be great. Yeah, we will be launching season 2 very soon. Wow. So right now you got some old episodes. Take a listen. The Trading Goats one is really relevant to this conversation. I think that's episode 1 or 2. And then also speaking with, you know who's on? I think, who's on season 1? Our mutual friend Akbar.
Oh, really? Wow. Nice.
Yeah. I'm going to just take a quick look. I think he's there. But that's how I heard about him. By interviewing him. Yep.
Nice. Awesome. Okay. Do you have any parting tips you would give to someone who's trying to get more clarity in their life and to move from fear to trust?
Yeah, I do. In the words, slightly modified words of one of my favorite childhood shows. This is also, I'm a nerd. I'm a closet nerd. You guys should know this. So I'm going to, instead of, I'm changing one word in this quote for those of you who are also nerds and know that I'm misquoting. Be compassionate to each other and party on, dudes.
I love that.
Do you know the movie I'm talking about?
No, who's that? Tell me.
It's Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Okay, I'm going
to write this down. It's a horribly nerdy movie. Okay, be compassionate. What was the quote again? Be compassionate with each other and party on, dudes.
I love that. That could be a beautiful motto too.
It could be.
Yeah. All right, Chris, that's amazing. So thank you very much for your time. It was an absolutely a very enlightening episode. I'll definitely I enjoyed it because I learned a lot of things myself, and I really mean it. And I'm gonna listen to it again and take notes because there's some true gold gems in what you said. I'm gonna listen to it again, and I highly recommend anyone listening to this to listen to it first, and then a second time take some notes because Chris has been dropping some absolutely amazing gems. So thank you for that, Chris. You have
You're welcome.
tremendous wisdom to share and experiences. And for anyone who's looking for some clarity, please reach out to Chris. I'll link up to his contact on the show notes. But mainly the podcast, which is the you said the practice mindful money, and the the practicemindfulmoney.com and the mindful money podcast. Yes, sorry.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah, so we'll get that to you. Thank you very much once again, Chris, and
No problem.
We'll have a great day. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely. It's been an honor to be here, and I really appreciate you and your audience. Thank you so much.
Same here. Cheers.
Right.